Gentlemen, I'm going to today talk to you about the battle in Ukraine. I haven't spoken about Ukraine for quite some time, but we must remember that the war has commenced 6 months back, and we wonder whether the Russians have achieved anything or they achieved nothing. And 6 months is a long time to keep on fighting and keep on fighting without commensurate results. Let's look at the background. When Putin started his invasion, he was in a different frame of mind. That is 6 months back. The Russian army was carrying out massive drills along with the army of Belorussia. China was on their side, supporting them in their belligerence, and the net result was that the West was very apprehensive. At that time, Putin thought that what Ukraine needed was shock and awe, a push, and there would be a regime change. It didn't happen like that. Why it didn't happen? That is because of the resilience, the resistance which the Ukrainians put up against the Russians. That's a fact. Of course, they were getting arms supplies from America, from other EU countries, because Russia, as far as the EU is concerned, is a pariah. They don't want to associate with Russia. Why? It's a historical fact. We don't need to go into details here. But the fact remains that they don't like Russia. Nobody wants to be with Russia. Russia is alone. It's also been expelled from the Council of Europe. So it has to wonder whether it's an Asian power, the European power, what power it is. But at that time when the invasion was mounted, even I was of the opinion that maybe it would take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and very soon the entire country would be overrun. Unfortunately, this didn't happen that way, or fortunately for Ukraine. And now 6 months battle has continued, and we must take stock of the situation and see what the Russians have gained and what they have lost. Now, the world is these days a very small place, and there is also a fact which the world must accept, that America is the omnipotent power in the world. It's not a multipolar world any longer, but a unipolar world where America is supreme. Putin was probably behaving like Goliath. He thought he's a very big person. He'd be able to overrun Ukraine, have a regime change, and the world will be clapping and saying, "Oh, what a great victory the Russians have won after the Nazis." But it has not happened that way. It reminds me of a movie which I saw with Sean Connery, The Man Who Would Be King. It's a story of two people who come to a forgotten land in Kashmir, in Ladakh, in I think Baltistan or something like that, and they become rulers there, and people think they are demigods. Ultimately, he likes a girl whom he marries, and that girl on the wedding night bites his ear, and blood comes out, and she says he's not a god. So Putin's problem is that he assumed he would be king when he was not king. He didn't have the power. He didn't have the motivation of the army to fight. Now, the army, we must remember, always fights if it is motivated, if the homeland is threatened. And in the battle in Ukraine, nobody could really imagine as to how Ukraine is going to threaten Russia. So that motivation was lacking. And the fact is that about 10 generals have been killed because they had to set the example by leading forward, and more than 100 officers of the rank of colonel and above have been killed. Now, these are very sad statistics as far as military warfare is concerned. Russians had superiority in air, and it's not understood why they didn't mount the offensives against Ukraine from day one, which they should have done, instead of treating it as a limited military engagement. Here again is a very fallacious thinking which Putin had, maybe infused by his generals, and thinking that he's Goliath, very powerful. But remember, Goliath was killed with one sling of a stone by David. That's in the Bible. So, unfortunately, Putin has not been able to close the deal, close the war. When he took over Crimea in 2014, the West almost accepted it, and perhaps he should have gone slow after that. But as I told you, he wanted to be king of Europe, the man who would be king, Sean Connery in the same movie, and he tried all stunts. I mean, the battle can be divided into two phases. The first phase is a total disaster. The Russian army moved against Ukraine, it moved against the two towns of Kharkiv and had to make a retreat. They retreated. Then they regrouped and attacked in the eastern zone. They may had some success there. I won't say they didn't have success, but that success over a period of 5 months is pyrrhic. It's like the British who won the Second World War against Hitler and turned out that it was a pyrrhic victory and they were so emaciated they became all bones, they had to give away all their empire. So, same thing is happening with Russia. They have won some territory in the Donbass region, but they haven't been able to finish the war. So, the point which I'm trying to make is 6 months of fighting, unable to finish the war, and continuing despite now all sorts of sanctions on Ukraine by Russia, blocking the seaports, everything. But major successes have eluded them even in the east. By now, they should have captured Odisha, which is the main port on the Black Sea. They will not be able to do it. I don't think they are anywhere near it at the moment. And despite bombing Kiev and Kharkiv, they haven't achieved anything other than a fringe of territory close to the Russian border in the Donbass region. You can't call that victory. It's not victory in any case. What is it? A defeat? Well, it's not defeat really, also. You can't say it's a defeat, but it's a stalemate. And the stalemate is, in a way, a sign of the failure of the Russian army. Now, I've been trying to analyze the situation here as to what really went wrong with the Russian campaign. The first thing was faulty planning. Second thing, not having sufficient amount of options available. Thirdly, feeling that you are like Goliath, all powerful, when you are nothing comparatively. Russia also has an economy which is 60% of India. I mean, their GDP is about 60% of India. And how can the hell can such economy sustain a conflict? And I am told things are not all that rosy in Russia now. There is resentment in the Russian army as to why they are fighting. Heavy casualties have taken place. They haven't been able to close the war. They haven't been able to win. They haven't been able to change the regime. And change of regime was one of the cardinal aims of Vladimir Putin. Now, what happens next? I think Putin is looking for a face saving way out. And of course, the Ukrainians are exhausted. But Russia could do anything desperate now. You see, there's an old story which we used to read when I was a schoolboy, of a boy who slips and falls in a pond, and he catches a twig. It's only the twig that is going to save him from being thrown away by the water. He keeps on holding the twig with the thought 1 minute longer till help comes. I think Putin is the same boat. He knows he's being swept away. He's keep holding on to a straw, a twig, to see that he can salvage something from the conflict and say, well, I won the war. Unfortunately, he hasn't won the war. And this for me is a surprise because I always anticipated the Russian army, the Air Force, to be very, very professional. But obviously, there has been something lacking, and that is motivation. Motivation is one of the principles of war. You can't fight a battle without motivation. You must remember that Bangladesh had almost 93,000 soldiers in East Pakistan during the 71 war, and they surrendered. They lost the motivation to fight, the will. Even the top general, Niazi, he didn't know what to do, and he said, okay, I surrender. Something similar is happening to the Russian armed forces which are fighting. How can it be reversed? Only if the Russians can win a bigger victory. If they can capture Kiev and Kharkiv, the situation will change, but that's not going to happen. The Ukrainians have dug in now, and Ukraine is not a small country. It's not a small population. It's got the largest population of Russia and Europe. And despite my distaste of Zelensky, there's no doubt about it that he hasn't caved in to Putin at all. Now the situation is that 6 months of fighting, result zero at the moment as far as we are concerned. And what next? Putin must be wondering what to do, and there must be a lot of opposition against him. But since he's almost like a dictator, nobody knows what's the extent of the opposition against Putin. What is the extent? Who are opposing him? The Americans would be more than happy to have a stable Russia with Putin, because an unstable Russia without Putin would be like a loose cannon and could start firing anywhere. The only solution to the problem is that somewhere or the other a face-saving option has to be given to Mr. Putin. I think the French have realized it, and it's about time that Putin didn't live in the dream world that he's going to break through and occupy Ukraine, carry out a regime change. All that has failed. And this is the essence of the problem, a failure of the Russian army. We all in over the world, the historians have to think over this aspect, how an army which is so sophisticated with the latest weapons and tanks couldn't win the war. The only option now, in my opinion, is for a face-saving retreat by Putin. Maybe he could hold on to the areas which are with him and keep them. But we'll have to see what happens next. In the meanwhile, 6 months of fighting has gone on. It's a fruitless fight. The Russian economy is in shambles. It is sustained only by China. And tomorrow, China also will have to think twice how long it can sustain the Russian economy. China itself is in deep trouble facing Taiwan, and they have drawn their lessons from this campaign. I don't think they're going to invade Taiwan, not now at least, after the failure of the Russian army to carry out their primary objectives. Thank you, gentlemen. I'll come back to you later with some more information on this aspect. But let me close now and tell you that the battle has gone badly for the Russians. They haven't succeeded. It's a stalemate, and Putin is at his wit's end. I close now with the hope that all of you will subscribe to this channel. Please do it. Share it with your friends. And thank you very much. Jai Hind.